All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to We'll Tell You What We're Reading from the Waltham Public Library. I am joined today by my colleagues Greg Carter, Liz Rior, and yours truly, Laura Bernheim. We have a small but quality group today, sharing titles that we've been enjoying or not enjoying. And then afterwards, per usual, we will talk about some of the TV shows and movies we've been watching. If you enjoy talking about your books, please join us at 7 p.m. on May 10th. That's Monday, May 10th, to tell us what you're reading. You'll hear from some of the same people in this broadcast, as well as some of our patrons. Or you're always welcome to join us on YouTube. Our next presentation of this will be Thursday, May 27th. Also at 2:30 p.m. live, but as always, you can watch us on demand. You can watch all of our past episodes on demand as well. As always, with all of our Waltham Public Library programs, please look at our library calendar so you can see what's going on. Anything that requires a Zoom links, we'll have the Zoom link there, as well as links to our YouTube channel and our Facebook Live. So without further, and I always have to remember to do this. We always want to thank our friends of the library. We are so grateful and so lucky to have such a wonderful friends group at the Waltham Public Library. As I always mention, but it never can get said enough, we could not have done a lot of our virtual programming over the last 14 months without our friends of the library. They actually make this possible by paying for our Zoom account. So thank you so much, and please consider supporting and joining our friends. One special option you can get as a friend member if you're not a Waltham resident, but still a fan of the Waltham Public Libraries, you actually can get access to museum passes. So just something to think about. I know our Zoo New England pass is very popular these days. So please join the friends and support them. So without further ado, we're going to start our program. And to start us off is Liz.
Hello, everybody. I hope you are all doing well today. I have 4 titles that I'm going to talk about. So let me just share my screen. And oops, I'm at the end. All right. So my first title today is The Lost Village by Camilla Sten. I read this in 2 days. It's a super fast, easy read. I loved it. I immediately gave it to my husband. He read it in like a day and a half. So it's a great book to just binge. So The Lost Village by Camilla Sten is a recent horror title set in a remote area of Sweden. In the 1950s, the entire population of the mining village of Silvertarn disappeared, except for a 3-month-old infant found alive in the village schoolhouse, and not found alive, a murdered woman tied to a pole in the town square. Yikes. In the present, we have Alice, who is the granddaughter of one of the former residents of the town that disappeared, of Silvertarn. She's an aspiring filmmaker, and she wants to do a documentary on this mysterious abandoned town and maybe try to figure out what happened. So the novel has 2 timelines in it. The first is in the 50s, leading up to the disaster where everyone disappeared, a baby was found, and someone was murdered. And then one in the present of Alice's documentary film crew arriving to the town and filming some spec footage for a GoFundMe, sort of a thing. So basically, the main question of the book is, 1, what the heck happened? Like, that's weird that all these people disappeared. And 2, will Alice and her film crew unravel the mystery of Silvertarn, or will they fall to the same fate as the town's original residents? I would give this book a solid like 3.5 or 4 stars out of 5. It's not perfect. It is in translation, so I'm not. Some of the wording seemed a bit unusual, like didn't flow super well, but I still really enjoyed it. I would recommend it to anyone who likes horror movies, like exploring abandoned places, conspiracy theories. If you're a fan of the show Lost or the podcast, oh my goodness, Limetown, which is also a TV show with Jessica Biel that I haven't watched. There's also a book, Limetown. That's why I'd recommend it too. It's really fast, it's really fun. It does get a little gory in some parts, but really, really knocked it out of the park and highly recommend it. My next book is Walking the Cape and Island, a comprehensive guide to the walking and hiking trails of Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket by David Weintraub. This is a book of 72 different walks/hikes of Cape Cod, Nantucket, and Martha's Vineyard. It's great for folks who want to get out and explore the beauty of the Cape beyond its beaches. It has hikes for beginners all the way to experts and is just full of gems. I took a weekend trip to the Cape earlier in the month and hiked 6 or 7 of the trails in this over the course of 2 days. And just, they were all totally great. My personal recommendation would be the Atlantic White Cedar Swamp Trail in Wellfleet and the Beach Forest Trail in Provincetown. I loved the trails I hiked so much that I actually bought a personal copy of this book to use and reference year round, and I can't wait to go back and explore more of the trails in this collection. My next book is Thirsty Mermaids by Kat Leigh. Kat Leigh is the co-creator of the graphic novel series Lumberjanes, which if you haven't read, I highly recommend. I won't get into it because it's not what I'm talking about today, but it's great for teens, tweens, and adults. Thirsty Mermaids is a graphic novel. I would say it's probably best for older teens to adults, possibly younger teens, but if you have a younger teen who wants to read it, you might want to take a look through first just to be sure. So fresh out of shipwreck wine, 3 tipsy mermaids decide to magically masquerade as humans and sneak onto land to indulge in much more drinking and a whole lot of fun in the heart of a local seaside tourist trap. But the good times abruptly end the next morning as, through the haze of killer hangovers, the trio realizes they never actually learned how to break the spell that turned them into humans and are now stuck on land for the foreseeable future. That description is from the publisher. This is just a really fun graphic novel. I read it in a day. The art is fun. It's just sort of about finding your chosen family, taking risks, asking for help, partying hard, recognizing when you need an assist and not worrying about what other people think of you. So really enjoyed it, really fun. And also check out Lumberjanes by the author if that is of interest to you. My last title is Hummingbird Salamander by Jeff Vandermeer. The picture I have on the screen is actually the audiobook cover. I was struggling to find a picture with a big enough resolution of just the book cover, so I'm not going to talk about the audiobook, even though it says read by Lisa Flanagan on it. I'm sure that she did a great job reading this audiobook, but I haven't listened to it. So in this book, security consultant Jane Smith receives an envelope with a key to a storage unit that holds a taxidermied hummingbird and clues leading her to a taxidermied salamander. Silvina, the dead woman who left the note, is a reputed eco-terrorist and the daughter of an Argentine industrialist. By taking the hummingbird from the storage unit, Jane sets in motion a series of events that quickly spin beyond her control. I only started reading this book a few days ago, so I can't actually tell you if I'm enjoying it or not, because I'm still trying to sort of get into the plot. But I'm a huge fan of Jeff Vandermeer's writing. I loved his Southern Reach trilogy, which was Annihilation, and then 2 other books, the names of which I'm forgetting because I'm great at being a librarian. Born, Dead Astronauts, I believe. Something about his sort of speculative / ecological themed fiction really gets me. So I have pretty high hopes for this title. I know it does tackle things like global warming, so I'm a little nervous that it'll make me kind of like, the earth is dying. But he's such a wonderful author and so descriptive and so creative that I'm really excited to get deeper into this title. So those are my books, and I will pass it over to Greg.
Hello, everyone. All right. My collection this month is a little bit short, unfortunately. I've only got 3, but we will share what I've got. All right, so bear with me. And There we go. All right. So if you've been with us since the beginning, this will not surprise you at all. I read a horror novel. Surprising, nobody, including me. Nocturnes by John Connolly. Not to be confused with John Connolly, the FBI agent who's in Boston. This is an Irish author. And he just made a collection of short stories ranging from like detective mysteries to haunted inns to something particularly nasty in the forest. Things about, I simultaneously love and hate short story collections. I love them because if you're not wanting to commit to like an entire length novel, you don't have to. You can usually read one of these in like an evening or an hour or two and be done with that and then go to the next thing. But the risk you run with it, on the other hand, is that sometimes it's a mixed bag. And this is kind of what happened with Nocturnes. There's a number of stories that I really liked, and there were a number of stories that I felt just were wasting my time. It's kind of all, I also listened to this on audio, so I'm also wondering if I was a little biased towards that, because The Gentleman, these stories take place all over the world, most exclusively, focusing mainly on either England or New England. And when the author was when the narrator was doing England, I usually love the stories, but when he was trying to do American accents, it left something to be desired. So I'm wondering if I actually read it like in a physical format, whether or not that would have been better. But I guess I would say, if I was grading this, like maybe a solid 3 out of 5, because there are 3 stories in here that I really, really liked as short stories. The first one is The Earl King, which is kind of a take on the fairy tale myth of like the king of the fairies. There's a kid who goes into the woods, even though he knows he's not supposed to go to the woods, and meets something particularly unpleasant. He manages to get away with his life, but unfortunately the thing follows him into his bedroom late one night, and he realizes that it's not just going to go away until it collects a prize of some sort. And it's pretty horrifying. It's just, ugh. The second one that I did like was Mr. Pentager's Demon. Pretty much what happens is that there is a priest who goes to a abandoned chapel in the 1940s and tries to fix it up, and finds that there is something living in the chapel that is not at all like the deity he is worshiping. So, hilarity ensues, and by hilarity, I mean horror, but this is what you're getting. And then last, but definitely not least, my personal favorite is The Inn at Shillingford. And I feel like this is where Mr. Connolly's like at his prime. It's pretty much, it's a great setup of a premise. There's an inn, a traveling salesman decides he's, needs to stay there for the night. He, is welcomed in, he gets some food, and it turns out that maybe his hosts are not among the living, and that there's something in his bathroom. It is just such, and I don't want to say anymore, but it is such like a creepy, eerie presence that just kind of builds up. Less is more. Probably should not have been reading this by myself in the middle of the night, but I'm not going to learn by this point. I mean, I am what I am. So so it was pretty fun. The other ones are kind of like, so I don't know how to properly recommend this, because it's like some are great, some are not, but check it out at your local library and it won't cost you anything. Mongrels. I'm kind of cheating with this one because I read this for my science fiction and fantasy book club. It's by Stephen Graham Jones. It is essentially about a narrator, a young boy who's never named, and he's being raised by his aunt and his uncle. And it turns out they're werewolves, and they're kind of determining whether or not he's going to be one. Usually it hits when you're 16, so the book starts at 8 and it kind of progresses through the years and sees, you know, how they live and how things and how the world reacts to them and what exactly are the rules of being a werewolf in this type of like universe. Some people have argued whether or not it's a coming of age book. I guess it could be, namely because he's going from like a child to his teens. And it's coming of age. What I found interesting is that, and a lot of like, I don't know, and a lot of teen books that I've read, one of the major aspects of like almost the entire, a lot of focuses tend to be on like relationships and of romantic nature. And the first ones, it doesn't really focus on that. It's more of a child who's eventually who's like coming into a new society, whether he wants to be a part of that society, how that's going to affect him, and how he needs to mature in order to adapt to it. It's really, I think it's really cool. It's clear that Mr. Jones put a lot of effort into like shaping these creatures and these characters. For example, being a werewolf and transforming into a werewolf when you are wearing like spandex is essentially a death sentence because you'll suffer a nasty case of impaction. I'm not going to go into any more detail on that. Yeah, no, it's bad. And on the other hand, also a lot of werewolves most of these werewolves don't tend to eat people, but one of the reasons if you do go rogue, it's because you've eaten French fries, because you like salt. And if you're eating them and you turn into a wolf and some poor schmuck is like eating the French fries and you can smell it on them, you go ballistic. So stick to eating animals in the woods, I guess. It's amusing. It's also heart-wrenching at a lot of points. If you've ever watched the movie Near Dark, which is kind of like about a bunch of feral vampires who are not really interested in, you know, high society, but are just trying to make do with each day. It takes a lot of inspiration from that. Also, you should see that movie. It's fantastic. Bill Paxton's in it. He is on his A game on that. Yeah, it's pretty much, oh boy, sorry guys. This is, get a cat. So in any case, speaking of furry monsters, yeah, it's a pretty good novel. Hold on, I'm gonna have to move this guy. And yeah, so I highly recommend it. All right, last and definitely not least, The Heart of the Sea. So this is by Nathaniel Philbrick, and he is, it's pretty much a story about, oh my God, hold on just a second. Just a moment, folks.
And this actually is a horror movie for our patrons watching at home. This is the part of the movie where the monster comes. Greg thinks he's safe. But really, it's a good segue actually into The Heart of the Sea, I feel like.
Pretty much, this is why I don't actually, this is what I get for being in my new bedroom. No, living room. Ugh. My apologies, folks. So, talk about the bloopers. So this is The Heart of the Sea by Nathaniel Philbrick. Long story short, it's based off of the, well, as it says in the subtitle right there, The Tragedy of the Whale Ship Essex. For those of you who don't know, it was a whaling ship that is apparently what Moby Dick was based on, actually. So during like, actually, I think right now, if I'm correct, this is taking place in the this is the like 200th anniversary of the tragedy. Long story short, it was a whaling ship that was in Nantucket, and they were setting out to hunt whales like you do, and a particular whale that they were hunting got angry and smashed their ship, and they're having to survive as a result of that. It's kind of horrifying. You learn a lot about how
it's actually really fascinating, like how like Nantucket operated during like the early 19th century. I did not realize that it almost kind of operated practically independently of the rest of Massachusetts, because how it, I mean, they were still beholden to the charter and whatnot, but because it almost exclusively like depended on like whaling as an economic resource, they did not, they operated a little differently. So for example, a lot of men went out across the world hunting for whales because they were known for being like the experts at it. As a result, a lot of women gained rights that they weren't not able to during the time of the 19th century, because they had to operate the city back at home. There's also a little bit, I guess there's a number of issues. This book is kind of eye-opening in a lot of ways on like how much of this tragedy could have avoided if they had done like a certain thing, if they went to point A as opposed to point B, if they had, I guess, taken certain other precautions. It's a short read, but I think it's really like, it's very factual and it's really enjoyable, makes history very entertaining, if not a little terrifying. Be warned, it doesn't really have too much of a happy ending, and in the same sense that the Donner Party didn't. That is the closest analogy I'm going to give you, but you can't say you're not warned if that was the case. Being trapped at sea can lead to some dire circumstances. But on that note, I am pretty much done. I'm going to turn it over to Laura, and I do apologize, world, that you had to deal with my cat Jackson. So take it away, Laura.
Wow, that's going to be a hard act to follow. Okay. The Donner Party, cat Zoom bombing.
This is why Audrey is the good cat. So, but there we go.
All right. So my first book is Chlorine Sky by Mahogany L. Brown. This is a coming of age novel about the complexities of friendship, especially about the complexities of teenage girl friendship. The narrator, Sky, opens the book telling us through verse about the pretty much what seems to be the ending of her relationship with her best friend, Laylee. I'm sure all of us, even adults, can relate to the ending of a friendship, especially back in those days. That was, I'm sure we all went through it, and it was horrible. And even 30 plus years later, it's always hard to reopen those wounds. We also learn about her volatile relationship with her sister Issa, Sky's love of basketball, and her love of swimming as well, the neighborhood pool, her first love, as well as her complicated relationship with her parents. The descriptions of the California setting, as well as Sky's neighborhood, are so lush. And really the setting is pretty much a supporting character. In fact, the author herself was saying, both in the author description in this book, but also I saw an interview with this author, she really wanted to write a love story to kind of her neighborhood and the California landscape around her. And whether you share any or most of Sky's experiences or not, I think it'll be hard enough to find something in here that you lived through as a teenager, all too real in some cases. I definitely, anyone who is a fan of Elizabeth Acevedo, the book Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson, or other novels told in verse, I highly recommend this. And even though you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, I'm always drawn to book covers, and look at how striking and gorgeous this cover is. It's really pretty much one of the most beautiful covers I've seen in a long time. So don't judge a book by its cover, although obviously publishers hire people for marketing for a reason, but gorgeous cover. So what happens when you take Judy Blume's book In the Unlikely Event, mix it with Peyton Place and Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson, and throw in just a dash of an Elizabeth Strout novel for good measure. Elizabeth Strout, I believe, is the author of Olive Kittredge. You get The Daughters of Erietown by Connie Schultz. This is a novel taking place over the course of 30 odd, maybe even 40 years, mainly about two women from one family, Ellie and her daughter Sam, or Samantha, who are from Erietown, Ohio. It is a not so thinly disguised Ashtabula, which is the hometown of Connie Schultz. Connie Schultz, by the way, for those who are not familiar with her, is a columnist from the Cleveland Plain Dealer and has written nonfiction. And she won the Pulitzer Prize for one of her columns. This is her first work of fiction. Ellie and her high school boyfriend, Brick, find that their life plans need to be altered when Ellie becomes pregnant right before graduation, and the two decide to get married. This was, of course, in the 50s, I believe. While the high school still allows Brick to graduate, Ellie is not allowed to. And that pretty much sets the tone for their life together, as well as pretty much informs the personality of their daughter, Sam, the baby in question. This book is definitely character-driven, as several years will pass between each chapter. So there's not even one standard plot to talk of. I would more accurately call this scenes from lives. Although some of the characters do some, what I would call pretty despicable things, pretty much every character does have sympathetic elements. The one exception to that is Brooke's father, who is just a pretty awful person and pretty unredeemable. Luckily not a major part of the book. My one nitpick with this book is I listened to it on audiobook, and the narrator is great. She does a very nice job, but the narrator is clearly not from this part of Ohio. My mother grew up outside of Cleveland, and she does not talk like this lady. The narrator pretty much talks a lot like I do, with my sort of, not quite Boston accent, but definitely very much a Northeastern US accent. I don't know anyone from Ohio, and I know a lot of people from Ohio. I'm not the authority on Ohio, but a great deal of my family come from there. They do not pronounce anything the way she does. Again, that is a minor nitpick, but I feel like I'm definitely going to recommend this to my mother because of where the book takes place. I am not recommending the audiobook to her. That being said, anyone else who's not from Ohio, listen to the audiobook. It's a great audiobook, and it's very quickly paced as well. My third book is the graphic novel Ichiro by Ryan Inzana. Ichiro, he is the son of a GI, American GI soldier, as well as a Japanese-born mother, was raised in Brooklyn, New York. His father died in combat when he was very young, and he's pretty much idolized this father, who he doesn't really remember that well. And he's pretty much, he's kind of obsessed with combat, and his paternal grandfather feeds into that a bit. At one point, Ichiro and his mother travel to Japan, where he has to stay with his maternal grandfather, as his mother continues on a business trip. Ichiro is not terribly happy about this situation. He doesn't know this grandfather very well, nor does he know the country of his mother's birth very well. But they actually do, the two of them do start to bond, and his grandfather is just lovely. You know, it's really becomes this nice sort of grandson-son bonding. Then the book takes a turn as it completely changes genres. When Ichiro follows what he thinks is a raccoon, it's not actually, he ends up in another world where he is captured and caught up in a war between Shinto gods, as happens. My summary is completely not doing this book at all justice. I'm so worried that no one is going to read it based on the way I'm describing it, but I'm afraid if I say more though, I'm going to give away too much. I will say it's a happy and lovely ending. I hope that's not too much of a spoiler. I really love the fact that this book is genre bending. It's a mix of fantasy, it's a mix of realistic fiction, family fiction. It's a coming of age story. It's a lot about identity. There's a lot about history, both about world history and Japanese history. There's a lot about Shinto mythology, which I actually looked up after I finished the book. I'm very lucky to have gone to Japan and have visited various Shinto temples and shrines, but I'm embarrassed to say I really don't know a lot about the Shinto religion, and this book really made me want to learn more. The art also, like any good graphic novel, really helps to tell the story with the modern day realistic, for lack of a better word, elements are in black and white and sepia, while the fantastical and mythological sequences, as well as some of the historical sequences, are very vibrant colors. I also love the importance of storytelling passed down through generations. It plays a very large role. And as appears to be a trend with pretty much my books so far this month, again, the setting, both the Brooklyn setting and he goes to various towns in Japan. The various towns in Japan are very important to the novel. Even more so in the previous two. I would say the setting is one of the main characters. And again, seeing Japan and hearing about its history through the eyes of Ichiro, as he really does think about his identity. So I think, and even if you're not a graphic novel person, I definitely recommend checking this out. So my fourth book is Sometimes You Have to Lie, The Life and Times of Louise Fitzhugh, renegade author of Harriet the Spy, by Leslie Brody. So it's been several years now, I'm not going to say how many, since I was a children's librarian. So I'll have to consult my colleagues in our children's room on whether Harriet the Spy is still a popular title. But it was the book when I was in upper elementary school. I'm not going to tell you how long ago it was, except hint, it was about 20 years after Harriet the Spy came out. So go look up when Harriet the Spy came out, and then you can figure out when I was in elementary school, add 20 years of that. One of my friends and I kid you not, in fourth grade, and I actually bought notebooks and stood in the playground taking notes on everybody else, especially all the kids playing kickball. Sadly, my notebook has been lost to either a move or water damage from a flood. Although truthfully, I think we wrote really boring stuff. I think I literally wrote like, Greg kicked the ball and ran to first base. I mean, that was, Harriet would be very ashamed of me. We also got really tired of it, I think, after about a week or two, and stopped imitating Harriet the Spy. So we were spared Harriet's pain of classmates finding our notebook and getting mad at us. Although truthfully, there was nothing for them to get mad about because we were bad spies. Anyway, this biography of the woman behind Harriet is a fascinating read, even if you're not familiar with the novel. Fitzhugh grew up in Memphis, Tennessee at the height of segregation and was the product of a marriage that later turned very scandalous. There was a lot going on that resulted in a very scandalous court case. And she actually was told her mother had died. Really, her mother was very much alive. Very fascinating. And as a result, she had a very complicated relationship with her parents. She also was a lesbian and has several girlfriends over the years, something she was free to be a little bit more open about when she moved to New York City, but still had to keep hidden publicly. Keep in mind, she came of age in the 50s and then, or 40s, 50s, and then Harriet the Spy, which was written in the 60s. Oh, good. Now you can figure out when I was in elementary school. But she still really had to keep it hidden publicly, especially when Harriet became a phenomenon. Well, I was very familiar with Harriet the Spy, as well as the other books in that universe, Sport and The Long Secret. And both from knowing them as a child and then revisiting them in the early days of my librarian career, I admit I knew almost nothing about the author except for her name. And to be honest, I didn't even really think much about it. While I was obsessed with sort of the personal lives of people like Judy Blume, Beverly Cleary, for whatever reason, I don't know why, I just didn't think much about this author. And I don't know how much there was known about her anyway until this book came out. This biography really makes me want to revisit Harriet the Spy, yet again, now that I have this new context. I also recommend, if anyone does read this book and enjoy it, I really recommend the book Awakened by the Moon by Leonard Marcus. It's a biography of Margaret Wise Brown, who many of you may know as the author of Goodnight Moon, which that book details not only the early days of sort of children's literature as it sort of came to be known, but well as Brown also had to hide a same-sex relationship from her public persona. And it was just, it's fascinating. I think it would be an interesting read. I think they both are read-alikes to each other, especially if you are interested in sort of again, sort of the evolution of children's literature and the people responsible for it. So my last book is The Cooking Gene by Michael W. Twitty. We read this for a book club meeting last week, and I wish we had a few more people attend. We had a small group. I think this book sparks a really interesting conversation about food justice, reckoning racial history, not just in the American South, but in the country as a whole, and identity. Twitty is a food historian who runs the food blog Afro Culinaria, that talks about the history of African-American food, including a lot of its roots in slavery. As he became more interested in what we think of as traditional Southern food, Twitty started what he called the Southern Discomfort Tour, which included, among other things, preparing food in the authentic way that an enslaved person would have prepared it as part of plantation tours. So that's when people actually take tours of actual plantations. He actually would be there making the food, really for people to remember this is what happened at those plantations. And he embarked on a lot of genealogical research, including doing DNA analyses on Ancestry and 23andMe, those types of organizations. The research is often difficult, as a lot of genealogical resources tend to be very Western European centric, really exposing issues, I think, with genealogy, in general, and really how not diverse that is as a study. Twitty, who is also Jewish, discusses his journey with Judaism as well, including comparing the history of the importance of food to either culture, as well as how he's been perceived by some of his students and families in the Hebrew and religious school classes that he's taught at various synagogues. Although this is nonfiction and therefore characterization is not often cited as an appeal factor necessarily, here it really is. Twitty really delves into his life. I said I hesitate to use the word character as a real person, but he really, he just talks so much about the importance of identity, but also just talks so much about his childhood and his relationship with his family, and really just comes so alive. And also just about the many relationships that he maintains and develops as basically as he goes through his journey. I recommend this book for anyone who wants to learn more about the history of the food they're eating, a deeper look into slavery and racism in the United States, as well as the importance of identity. I also recommend Twitty as a social media follow. You can follow him, I think, on Twitter and Instagram at Kosher Soul. And he's a great Twitter follow. And he's fully vaccinated, I just found out. He just posted that on Twitter. So those are my books. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I'm gonna put us into gallery view. And Tanuki, thank you, that was the word. Liz reminded me that's actually what the shapeshifter, the raccoon that Ichiro follows in Ichiro is called Tanuki. Have you read the book, Liz? Have you read the graphic novel?
I have not read it, but my undergraduate degree was in East Asian Studies, and I lived in Japan for a year as part of that program. So I really love Tanuki and all the sort of lore associated with them.
Oh,
but I am going to put Ichiro on a list, I think, because I like it.
Yeah, especially since you are familiar with a lot of it, I think you'll definitely have an appreciation for it. I really enjoyed it a lot. So great, that was a great discussion. It was nice to see your cat. Nice. Oh, it's good. It's good to have a guest star. We have a smaller group today, so that's fine. Next time you should tell him to share a couple titles.
Oh yeah, very, very articulate and literate, that one. Currently, I am in another room with the door locked to make sure he can't get in, just to be on the safe side. I don't know if it's going to be a raptor thing.
But hopefully not. Hopefully we'll not be living in Jurassic Park 5 or 6. I've lost track of how many of those movies there are. But we're not talking about Jurassic Park today, but we are talking about other TV shows and movies that we've enjoyed. I know Greg and I have just both finished Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We were talking before we came on. I very much enjoyed it for the most part. I thought it really did great service to the two main characters. Two characters I thought were very interesting in the movies, but were not very well developed. I think without sort of the specter, or without because there was sort of a specter of Steve, but without the actual Steve Rogers, Chris Evans character being there, I feel like both Sam and Bucky were allowed to really grow and shine. And I love, especially what they did with Sam's character. I think just his journey throughout the show is amazing. And I also really like that Bucky was not just a plot device. I feel like in the movie, he literally was a plot device. And, but yeah, there are a few characters, cough, Sharon Carter, cough, that I felt could have been a little bit more well used. I don't know, Greg, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm as a Carter myself, I'm always sensitive about, Carter's getting done wrong. There's a number of, I guess there's some potential for her character, but it just kind of seemed, without giving too much away, they do something with her that just seemed very out of left field for how she's been portrayed before. So it's like, okay. My favorite, one of my favorite parts of the whole thing, though, was what they did with Zemo. Because if you've seen Captain America: Civil War, Zemo's kind of the dude who like causes the division, but he's kind of really more of like a plot device in that as well. Like he's, your team Cap or your team Iron Man in that movie. It's not really like Zemo's just there to set it in motion. Here he has quite a bit more character development. He's very, and like any good villain, he sometimes asks questions that are a little bit difficult to, answer. Like, is this, and again, his character, I can't really say too much without giving it away, but I think David, what's his last name? David Brühl?
Bruhl is the
yeah. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but I think he did a fantastic job. He rocks a mean jacket, so I'm all for that. Everything you said in regards to the Falcon 2, that's very much his show, and I am here for it. And at the end of the day, I didn't think it was perfect. There were some things I wasn't thrilled about, but I'd be interested to watch if something else with them, and I'd call that a success. So, thumbs up.
Yeah, I agreed. I'm glad you brought up Zemo because I had forgotten about that. I felt there were two characters they brought from the movies in addition to Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes, and that was Sharon Carter and Zemo. And Sharon Carter I was excited about, and Zemo I was like, ugh. And he ended up being what a pleasant surprise. I thought the actor just did so much with that character. And yes, I think he also was probably he was definitely a plot device in Civil War. And just in terms of, they're not original characters because all of these people come from the comics, but in terms of characters new to the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Carl Lumbly, I don't know if it's a spoiler alert to say the character he played, so maybe I won't, just to be on the safe side, but Carl Lumbly, who I think is an excellent actor, if anyone's familiar with him. I first knew him from the show Alias. He played Agent Dixon, but he's one of those actors who's in everything. And I think deserves a lot more recognition than I think he gets. And he's just phenomenal as a character that was from the comics, but was never mentioned in the movies before. And the movies really have not done a lot in terms of racial justice. And I felt like this show really went the furthest that it's done in a good way. I was really impressed with that. Black Panther did a little bit with the Michael B. Jordan's character, Eric Killmonger. A lot of what he discussed, but this show really, and Carl Lumbly really plays a character that really, I think, shows a lot of real life atrocities that happened in this country, but also what happened in the Marvel universe. I thought was just amazing. The other two were, I forget her name, Erin Kellyman, forgive me if I'm saying her name right, and Wyatt Russell played two characters that were new to the show. I'm mixed on both of them. I ended up liking both of them mainly, but I think, yeah, and I think with Marvel, with these shows, they're really good and intriguing. I don't think they quite stick the landing. I think Falcon the Winter Soldier, in my opinion, I thought stuck the landing much better than WandaVision did. I really liked WandaVision until the end, where I felt like WandaVision, they were thinking, oh, I guess I need to end this show. But where I did not feel like that, I felt this was very satisfying, and yet I still want to see what happens to these characters, and I'm excited. It sounds like there's going to be a movie. I don't want to say the name of the movie because it might be a bit of a spoiler, but if you read anything about Marvel news, you already know what I'm talking about. And so it's great that they're going to live on. Liz, you had a couple shows that you had mentioned before we went live. I'd love to hear you talk about them.
So I love a good video game movie. And the most recent entry in the Mortal Kombat franchise got released on HBO Max last week. For those who are unfamiliar with Mortal Kombat, the simplest way I can put it is it's a fighting game. And in the fighting game, there's two teams, and whichever team wins decides the fate of the earth. That's sort of the simplest way I can put it. Growing up, I never actually played the Mortal Kombat fighting games, but then I would play the game. Soul Calibur was my like person versus person like fighter. Greg's got some hot opinions on Mortal Kombat, which is good. We both like Mortal Kombat a lot. Anyways, okay, so there's this movie. Is it good? No. Does the plot make sense? Absolutely not. Is there great action and people getting their heads crushed very violently? That's true to the game. Yes, 100%. So if you just want to watch an action movie with lots of martial arts and over-the-top blood effects, Mortal Kombat is for you. Has some nice little in-jokes to different phrases that are used in the game. And yeah, that was fun. Is it, the Red Shoes or Babette's Feast or Citizen Kane? Literally no, not in any universe, but it's great. And then I have also been watching, what is it called? It is Life in Color with Sir David Attenborough, which is on Netflix. I love a good nature show. And this is sort of the next installment in the various David Attenborough narrated nature documentary series that focuses on how animals and plants use color to exist. So it's pretty fascinating. As always, the photography and filming is really wonderful. It's very high def. I love all creatures, great and small, with the exception of the naked mole rat. So it's just delightful to me. And then, yeah, those are sort of the two that I was going to talk about.
Thank you. The Mortal Kombat, I actually did play it in college a little bit. I was terrible. I'm really bad at video games. My opponent they would yell, "Finish him," as I'm sure that must have been in the movie. And my spine would get shoved out of my mouth. It was super gross.
There was no spine ripping in the film, at least not that I can recall.
Oh no.
Someone mentions ripping somebody's spine out, but they don't actually do it. But there are the phrases "flawless victory," which made me just like, ah! So.
Oh, spine ripping. I call shenanigans.
Yeah, I need to. Well, I've actually never seen a Mortal Kombat movie, but I feel like I would, at least having a mild understanding of the game, I would have some appreciation. And maybe while it's still on HBO Max, it's actually getting decent reviews. A lot of the YouTube review shows I watch seem to like it. So maybe it is Citizen Kane. I don't think Citizen Kane is Citizen Kane. Honestly, there's my hot take for the day. That all sounds good. In addition to Falcon the Winter Soldier, just two shows I was going to give a shout out to. Both shows I've been watching for a while. One is Superstore, which just ended the series, sadly. For those who don't know Superstore, it's basically an ensemble comedy about people that work in it's a big box store, so something like a Walmart or a Target, except in this case, Cloud9. It's a fictitious chain. And if anyone has ever worked in any sort of retail, I did at one point before I worked at the library. It's pretty funny. I mean, yes, are some of the characters over the top? Absolutely. But I liked it. And I have to say, I thought they did a good job ending it. I thought the last episode was very satisfying. I thought all the characters were left in a good place, and it was still funny. So if you haven't seen Superstore, please check it out. I think we actually own some of the seasons on DVD. It's definitely in the network, and it is streaming on a couple of different streaming platforms. So I definitely recommend it. The other show that I watch is All American, another one I've watched since the beginning. If anyone is not familiar with this show, it is I'm definitely based on a real life NFL player who lived in California and then actually played football in Beverly Hills. He in the show, Spencer James is a character in the show. That's not the real person's name. Lives in South Crenshaw in the show. I don't know actually where the real person lived, and that's pretty much all it has in common. Is that? But then I enjoy this show a lot. I think it's turning a little bit into Beverly Hills 90210. It's gotten a little bit too much of a soap opera. With there are a lot more love triangles than I would have liked. I thought the first couple seasons sort of about identity and about a teenager having to live in both worlds and being an African American living in Beverly Hills and also living in South Crenshaw, I thought was really fascinating. I thought his relationships with both his host family in Beverly Hills, of whom the father actually is someone who grew up in South Crenshaw and had known his family, and also his friends back at his old high school, really interesting. But I guess I'm still enjoying it, but it is kind of turned into a bit of 90210. And I wish it would kind of go back to more of its roots. But again, I'm still enjoying it. And yeah, is it weird? I'm in my mid-40s and I'm watching a teen drama, probably. But thank you, Liz.
Absolutely not. No.
I read comic books. Whatever.
So there you go. But that's also available streaming. That is on Netflix, and you of course can watch Netflix through a Roku you get from the library. Greg, any other final shows or movies you've been watching that you want to share?
I got one, and we had mentioned it before we did this. I've been watching Chernobyl on HBO. It is not a happy story, but it is a fantastically well done miniseries. It's honestly, I haven't been more invested in something than in this for a while now. I think that it does a great job in portraying the just sheer scope of the horror that occurred, and it doesn't give any easy solutions as to it doesn't point a finger at one particular person saying this man or this woman was responsible. Granted, it shows there are people more responsible than others, but it's ultimately a story about people not taking a certain matter seriously, not appreciating the awesome power of the science they're wielding, and ultimately paying for the fact that they want to cover it up rather than admit the truth, even though one way or another it's gonna, the awfulness of it is gonna happen. I think it's the closest, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Liz, or well, actually it's an opinion, so whatever. It's the closest I've seen to actually, at least from this, depicting a real life cosmic horror story. It is just something so beyond humanity's control, and yet we think we can control it anyway. And it's very humbling. And I would recommend watching it, though maybe on an empty stomach, because radiation poisoning is, I think it's probably one of the worst ways to go. And because it is just
gross.
It is gross, it is heart-wrenching, and it is just, I don't want to go these people who are I want to tour Chernobyl, even though it's no, I don't. I like spooky stuff. Normally I'm the guy who it's something's haunted, great, let's check it out. No, I'm not going anywhere near Chernobyl. Never. I don't care if people say it's fine. The radiation levels are low. I don't care if birds are flapping around. I'm not going anywhere near it. End of story. It's just, And again, I'm not saying that I'm not, it's not even a question of whether or not I think like nuclear power is good or not. It's just like when it goes wrong, it goes really, really wrong. So I guess, kids, I'm just saying, take the awesome power of the atom seriously, because, oh my God. Yeah, and that's how I'll end it.
Chernobyl, the miniseries on the to-do list. Chernobyl, the actual location, a day trip to, on the to-don't list.
Exactly. Very,
But
very,
it is so good. I
Oh,
cannot
it's good.
recommend it enough.
yeah, no, it's the acting's superb.
Well, on that cheery note, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This was really fun. Hope we gave you some ideas of some books as well as some TV shows to watch. As a reminder, you can get all the titles we talk about through the library, either as a print book, as a book on CD, or most of these are available electronically through either Overdrive or Hoopla. I know for a fact, Daughters of Erietown is available on Overdrive, so I got to the Libby app. The Cooking Gene is available as both an audiobook and ebook through Hoopla, which means it's always available. And I know most of the titles, all the titles I think that both Greg and Liz talked about are available electronically. So you can always get those 24/7. And as well as some of the shows we mentioned are available, either some of them on DVD, but as I mentioned, also we loan out Roku's, Disney Plus and Netflix. Both, I said All American that I mentioned is on Netflix, and you can get that in a Roku. Falcon and the Winter Soldier is on Disney Plus. Mortal Kombat is not yet available for a library, but it will be eventually. We will definitely get the DVD, or it'll be available on a streaming service that we subscribe to on our Roku. So thank you. And special shout out to our coworker, Pat, who actually joined us in the chat today. So hi, Pat. Thank you so much for your nice comments. And we will see you next month on May 27th. And we hope some of you join us on May 10th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. So thank you so much, everyone. Take care. I'm gonna do the wave.